Letters Across Winter. Chapter 1. The Letters She Never Sent. Clara sat by the frost-rimmed window of her dorm room, her fingers wrapped around a chipped porcelain mug. The tea had gone cold long ago, but she didn't move. Outside, Istanbul was wrapped in the kind of stillness only a winter morning could bring. White rooftops, lazy curls of smoke from chimneys, and a muted sky holding back snow. Sketchpad lay open on the desk, untouched since last night. Lines half formed, buildings that would never be built. In the corner of the page, she had absent-mindedly drawn the curve of a man's smile. She tore the page away. In the bottom drawer of her desk, under old syllabi and lecture notes, she reached for a battered envelope, unaddressed, unopened. It had her name on it, but it wasn't hers. Her father's handwriting. Clara, if you're reading this, I hope it's because you finally needed to hear my voice again. She hadn't had the courage to open it in 2 years, not since he passed away on a rainy November morning, just 2 months before she left for university. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She slipped the letter back without reading it. Clara's phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Amelia. Are you coming to the lecture? Prof. Viral is asking for your model, Amelia asked over the phone. She didn't reply. Instead, she reached for her coat and scarf. The silence in her room had started to ache. The university's stone corridors echoed with footsteps. Clara walked slowly, trying to prepare herself for the day. But she wasn't thinking about her architecture model. She was thinking about how nothing had felt alive to her since her father's funeral. Not even Istanbul, which she had once dreamed about for years. Not even the Bosphorus with its glinting lights, or the way the minarets looked golden at sunset. Until Ethan Reed smiled at her on the bridge that day. They met during the second semester. Clara had lost her way trying to find the engineering block for a guest lecture she wasn't even required to attend. He was leaning against the railing of Galata Bridge, notebook in hand, eyes following the fishing lines dropping into the water. He looked peaceful, almost out of place in the noise of street vendors and tourists. She didn't mean to interrupt. I think I'm lost, she said quietly. He looked up and gave her a smile that felt like a warm blanket. You're either in the wrong place or exactly where you're supposed to be, he said. She blinked, unsure whether to smile back or keep walking. He gestured toward the ferry dock. Engineering block is across the way, but the best ideas happen when you're not looking for them. That was Ethan. He didn't push, he didn't chase. He just showed up quietly and stayed. Now, 6 months later, his presence had woven itself into the empty spaces of her life, becoming entangled completely. He would find her in the library, with red-rimmed eyes, and not ask what was wrong. He'd just slide a chocolate bar across the table and go back to reading. He never asked about her past, and she never talked about her father. Never pried. They sat together at cafés and ate in silence that didn't feel awkward, but peaceful. He would sometimes hum Sinatra under his breath, or tell her about his life in Brooklyn. She knew all about his family, his brother, his dog, and his mom, although he barely mentioned her. She didn't know why it mattered, but she wanted to know more. That evening, she found him outside the faculty hall, watching the snowfall. You weren't in class, he said without turning around. I needed air, she replied, and time. He nodded, like he understood. She stood beside him, their shoulders almost touching, but not quite. You ever feel like you're living someone else's life? She asked. He smiled faintly. All the time. There was a silence. Then he said, I wanted to tell you something. Her heart tripped. I got an offer. It's a research opportunity in Boston. Starts this summer. Clara turned her head slowly. That's amazing. He looked at her then, and for the first time, his eyes weren't soft. They were searching. I haven't said yes yet. Why not? He hesitated. Because some things don't wait. Her breath caught. The world around them felt muffled by snow and something heavier. Clara, he said, his voice lower. I don't want to go if it means leaving something unfinished here. That night, Clara wrote a letter. Ethan, I never believed in timing. Not really. I used to think life happened the way it was meant to, that maybe we all had a thread pulling us toward a certain end. But maybe that's just something people say when they're scared of choosing. I'm scared of choosing, because every choice feels like a betrayal. To my father, to who I used to be, to everything I thought my life would look like. But when I'm with you, I feel less like I'm surviving and more like I'm finally alive. That matters. I don't know what it means yet, but I don't want to lose it. She folded the letter up and placed it in an envelope. She put the envelope beside the first one, the one from her father, and closed the drawer. She didn't send it. 2 days later, her grandma called her from London. How's the weather there, darling? Snowy, Clara replied, like home. There was a pause on the line. Have you been happy, Clara? Her grandmother asked gently. Clara swallowed. I don't know yet. Well, her grandma replied, your father always said happiness wasn't something that came to you. It was something you fought for. The next time Clara saw Ethan, it was at the library. He was packing up his notes. She worked up the courage to walk up to him and held out a folded sheet of paper. I never sent it, she said, but I wrote it. That has to count for something. He took it carefully, eyes locked on hers. It does, he said softly. It really does. But fate is cruel with timing. 3 days later, Clara received a call from her Uncle James. There had been a fall. Grandma Grace was in the hospital. Clara booked the earliest flight she could to London. She never got to she never got the chance to say goodbye to Ethan and see him one last time. When she returned 6 weeks later, his name was gone from the mailboxes. The desk he always sat at in the library, empty. All trace of him gone. All that remained was a single letter waiting for her in her room, under her door. It was addressed to her, in his handwriting. Clara, I waited for you, but maybe it wasn't our time yet. Maybe life has its own architecture, one we don't understand until it's finished. I hope one day we find each other again, in a different city, a different season, when the snow is melting and we've learned how to choose. Her knees buckled, and she knelt on the dorm floor, clutching the letter in her hands. Tears welled up in her eyes. Some love stories didn't start with confessions. Some started with silence, with snow, with the letters you never sent.